Welcome. You're listening to The Aligned Self, Conversations in Creating a Conscious and Abundant Life. This is Daniel Denovi. I'll be your guide and host. Let's see just where we can take this. Hello, friend, and welcome into this continuing series on manifestation. So this has been something that has been kicked around by some of my clients lately, just coming up in conversation. And it's how do you recognize when you're about to usher in a new level, like up-level your game or even take a quantum leap? There are certain things that occur in your life, certain perceptions that shift, that indicate that you're moving into a new phase. So I think there's 5, or I'll talk about 5 today. There's actually more than that, but 5 predominant ones that I can reflect back on and talk about today. First and foremost, you start to slay sacred cows. And what I mean by that, those sacred cows are those ideas, establishments that you've kind of accepted as being bedrock in your environment, bedrock in society. Like you might start questioning the news. You might start questioning the government and certain narratives in your community. You may begin questioning your religion. The things you've been told all your life just suddenly don't seem to make sense. In other words, you start to separate yourself from the crowd. Number 2, you start to become quietly dissatisfied with your life, dissatisfied with the things you've created, the structures you have in place, your relationships, the job, your lifestyle. You just begin questioning it. You might question a hairstyle that you've had for years. You might start cleaning things out, cleaning out the closets, cleaning out the garage, throwing stuff away. It's just like you're tired of having this stuff. Things that you once tolerated, you no longer have any tolerance for. This can be considered inspirational dissatisfaction. You're quietly dissatisfied with your life. And when I say inspirational, because you don't want to stay here anymore. You don't want these conditions to change. So you either change yourself or you change your conditions. And typically, if you change, all these old structures that you created under another persona, another set of intentions, they too will fall away. And if they don't fall away consciously, they'll fall away from neglect because you're just a different person. You're no longer supporting them, those circumstances, with the energy that you once had. Another way of talking about this is what once worked for you no longer works for you. Could have been your career, could have been your relationship. Again, different aspects of your life, maybe your health, and suddenly you have a new commitment, a new vision for your life. And this leads me into number 3. You get this feeling like there's something more, that you could be more, that you can make a bigger difference, a more profound difference, maybe even create a whole new life. Because, and this could be number 4, but I'll keep it in this one, because it no longer feels authentic. You have a greater desire to live authentically, to be more aligned with who you really are. Perhaps you've realized that you've created a set of circumstances in order to fit into somebody else's view of who you are, somebody else's expectations. And maybe you just went along with the program. You just went along with the story. Like it didn't make that big a difference at the time because, maybe you didn't value your dreams. And maybe the circumstances that you allowed yourself to be in, you just figured, I can make it work. And maybe down the road I'll have time for me. But you realize that you've been putting you on the back burner for a long time. And it's likely not to get any better. And so you're dissatisfied with that idea. And you need to live authentically. And authentically is where your heart is aligned with your mind and your body, where your environment supports who you are. It's an expression of who you are. Behind this need to be more authentic is the idea that if you were more aligned with who you could be, who you really were meant to be, that you would be more passionate about your life, more excited about your life, more in joy about your life. So there's that wondering, I know there's something I'm here to do, something I'm supposed to be. And for one reason or another, this isn't it. And that brings us to number 4. And typically, this is on the backside of being quietly dissatisfied. And I already talked about this in a previous episode, a couple episodes ago, about the void. And that is the space between here and there. You realize that what has been is no longer working. Who you were isn't who you want to be anymore. But you're not quite yet sure of what's on the other side. So there's this chasm that you kind of go through in between. It's the gap. It's the getting through the going through. You're neither here nor there. And sometimes there's this feeling of listlessness. There's like nothing seems to work. Nothing that, is in your life you no longer appreciate. You no longer tolerate. You no longer want. And you're left questioning, just who do I want to be? Who am I? What's possible? I know there's something on the other side of us, but man, this is hard. This is tough because there's a state of confusion that's there. And that's typically happens when the ideas that we were once accepted as true no longer work. And sometimes there's an event that happens in your life. Sometimes there's just a decision or maybe a threshold that you cross and you just can't get back to where you were. It's a realization. It's the straw that broke the camel's back. One more thing, and you realize, I can't do this anymore. And so sometimes this getting through the going through feels like a walk through the desert. You just kind of go through the motions in your life. You realize that you don't really want to be where you are. You don't know where you're going, but you have to walk this path. You have to take this journey in order to get where you want to go. It's just getting through the going through. And then we're at number 5, and that is a sense of awakening. It's as if the clouds begin to clear, you feel lighter, life seems more bearable, it just seems easier. Things start falling into place. You find synchronicities start to occur on a more and more frequent basis. Synchronicities are those events and peoples that seemingly show up as if by miracle to answer your question. It could be the books, the people, the circumstances, the TV shows, the YouTube videos, TikTok videos, whatever information's coming in seems to support your current question. The question of who can you be, what's possible in your world, and who knows, maybe it's a certain podcast you're listening to. You might start attracting like-minded people. I can remember having a conversation with a woman in a hotel lobby in 1988. Her name was Catherine, and just the way she talked about the world, talked about the universe and support from God and meditation, and it just put the things that I had thought about for so long and crystallized them in one conversation right in front of me. And I realized that there was a whole new world out there for me. It opened it up. It opened up possibility. And frankly, I've never been the same since. But that conversation was an answer from the universe of something I had thrown out there at the beginning of the year when I started a revolution for my life. I wanted to shake things up. I wanted something new. I wanted something different. I wanted a whole new reality. And I talk about that in The Path of the Mystic in episode 50. And beware of the power of making a declaration that wide sweeping, because it does sweep clean everything. Relationships, where you live, who you are, what you're doing for a living. Nothing is sacred. And this is where I talk about, slaying sacred cows. Those things that you once thought were part of you, part of the establishment, they tend to fall away. And then along with this awakening is this feeling of accelerating acceleration. You begin to build momentum. Experience after experience start to stack on each other until you're moving quicker than you ever have before. And I talk about that in the episode on the void. By being with it, by being present and just accepting that this is getting through the going through, it makes a quantum leap possible. And what that means is at the beginning of this process where you start to slay sacred cows, like things just don't seem right, that you're not in Kansas anymore, like where are you? You start to question everything all the way through the different processes. It's not a linear progression, meaning that it's not necessarily step by step. You go leaps and bounds to a whole new level of being. But in that process, there's a deconstruction, a letting go, a tearing down of the old to usher in the new manifestation. And speaking of manifestation, I just remembered back in item 2, when you become quietly dissatisfied with your life, Abraham Hicks talks about this as contrast. And you basically become very aware of what you don't want. By contrast, creating what you do want. Now, there's a technique that I'm going to talk about, and I'll talk about in more detail, but basically I call it strike that, reverse it. I was a big fan of Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory with Gene Wilder. Now, I realize that I'm dating myself, but I think Gene Wilder cannot be replaced as Willy Wonka. But there's a line in the movie that really struck me. Near the end, he says, "What are we waiting for? Let's go. We have so much time and so little to do." And then he stopped and says, "Strike that, reverse it." And then ever since I heard that, I've used it in my life. Every time that I said something that I didn't want, I would say, strike that, reverse it. And I would create the opposite. See, the mind is a difference engine. So when you see circumstances that you don't want them anymore, and you can't even imagine, how did you even create this? When you see what you don't want, understand that this is the mind doing what it does. It sees what it doesn't want in order to create what it does want. Now, me personally, it has taken me almost all my life, years and years, to be able to utter exactly what I want. And I rarely speak about what I don't want, but people do that all the time. My wife will say something that she doesn't want the kids to do, and I'll offer up what we do want them to do. Like, don't get dirty. I say, stay clean. It has just become second nature for me. And it's because I've done that over and over and over again. Strike that, reverse it. Strike that, reverse it. And, give yourself permission to talk about what you don't want and then say, what I do want is this. This is the same idea that I talked about in that 5-Minute Friday, episode 175, about putting limiting beliefs in the past. And that's where we talk about the limiting belief as something that we used to do or something we used to believe and put it in the past. And then we talk about what we do believe today, what the belief that we want to replace it with. So that's it for this 5-Minute Friday, where we talked about the 5 gates, the 5 doorways to a quantum leap in your life, a new level of being. Until next time, this is your friend and host, Daniel Danovi, urging you to follow your bliss. Live your life from inner signals. Be inner directed as you engage in the epic adventure.